Yeah, welcome. Welcome back. I'll talk over this. This is a continuation of an earlier program that we aired, and we're here with Ann Beyster, and we're talking about the book, We the Owners. This is a continuation of an earlier program we aired, part one. This would be part two, and it's so good to come back and talk about this film and about the ownership concept that she's had such a job. She was the executive producer of this film. And Ann, welcome back to part two of this conversation. There's a great deal more we can talk about, but it's so good to welcome you back for part two.
Thank you.
Now, we just watch, those who have been viewing, they'll become as one piece in a certain sense. We could continue from where we were in the last program, and we had showed some clips about that. And you were bringing up some very interesting points. You're very, very familiar with the content of the film and with the ideas and so forth. Maybe you could pick it up in your view of what we saw.
What we just saw.
What we just saw, and pick it up, and then let's talk and elaborate on some of the themes that are legion, really. And then we have one more clip that we want to show. But maybe you could do that for us.
So in the last part, we had one clip that talked about open book management and transparency, which you and I had talked about. But we also in the film wanted to cover some of the other management opportunities, if you will, when you have an employee-owned company.
Yeah.
And so the clip actually covered the decision-making process, that it's participative.
Yeah.
And you probably remember the division of labor comment that Chris Mackin discussed. And I thought that was an important concept to get into the film.
Yeah.
Because there's some fear if it's an employee-owned company that every decision is a consensus. And these are participative. And there's a difference between participative and consensus.
You did say there is a role for the CEO.
There is a role.
That in a sense is there's a role for the structure.
There is a role for the structure. You tend to see more committees in these kind of companies and participative. But ultimately, people are responsible to making certain decisions. So I thought it was important because sometimes when people are looking at employee ownership as an opportunity to integrate into their company, which means more employees, non-executive and executives have ownership, that the control aspects is something that concerns them. And these are well-managed, they need to be well-managed companies.
Yes,
and there needs to be defined who's responsible.
Right.
But again, they do tend to be more participative.
Right.
And that allows people to be able to get information, as we talked about through open book management, be able to understand it, and then be able to act on that information. And so that means it's more participative style. So we have that. We had that
participatory,
very
democratic democracy.
Yeah.
Participatory democracy. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. Right.
So that was one thing that we wanted to show that as a work practice. We also showed the recruiting and situations like a layoff. And so there was the Gary Dick story we just saw in the last clip, which is a wonderful man that works at New Belgium Brewery that told his story about how he had worked in coal mines, and then he advanced to a large brewer in the area out in Colorado, and then was given early retirement. And if you remember in the clip, he describes how he was treated and how he felt about that way of being treated. But he was not asked to share any of his information before he left to any of the people that were remaining, but was basically treated like a number. And had no value.
Yeah, right.
Here's someone that's in mid 50s, right? Yeah. It's a very common story. And when we had the pleasure of interviewing him and he was able to describe that story, we knew it needed to be in the film because he joined a company that respected that he had knowledge and that he could learn new things and he could engage as a high-performing individual, and that he joined was New Belgium Brewery. And he was attracted to them because of the culture and the respect that they had for all their employees, but also someone that came in the mid-50s.
Right.
And that they also looked out for retirement. And I think that's a common issue that we're facing across the country.
Yeah.
Is we have a lot of individuals that have a lot to offer as they get older in their career. And if a company doesn't think long-term enough, and they're maybe pressuring towards quarterly performance, then they look at layoffs as the solution, and they treat people like numbers.
I'm afraid a lot of that's going on, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, I know. It's a sad business.
So we set that clip up to have a discussion. Again, primarily this film is being used in classrooms. It's also being used in companies as well.
Good.
But when you're facing a layoff situation, what are the alternatives? How can you avoid treating people as just, well, we can't tell them anything and we'll just lay them off? You know, how do you engage a workforce if you're facing bad times, which can happen to employee-owned companies, can happen to great companies.
Sure.
And
it can happen to national economy.
Yeah. And so the management and the leadership challenge is to engage in a discussion about what the financial situations are and what are the alternatives. And there are a lot of other alternatives other than laying people off that employees will engage in discussions of reduced time, deferred compensation, moving to other divisions within the company if it's large enough. There's just a number of things that we queued that up in the clip, and there's some additional information later that follows in the film for people to consider.
Those are things that are going on, and maybe it's worth reiterating because it came out in the first clip. I mean, the first program, but this is keying off, in a certain sense, the work of a man, Louis Kelso, who was the one who came up with the idea of expanding ownership in a general pattern kind of way. And he noted that over time, if you have two things, if you have labor's input into production, then you have what they call capital instruments, or everything else other than labor, including land and so forth, that the trend, he had that quote from Benjamin Franklin saying that the input to production in the time of the founding fathers of something other than labor, the resource bases were all there when we came out of the cave. All the iron was there, all the steel, all the coal, everything was there. We had a liaison with technological extension of capability to make tools and technology to make the world other than in the need-like sense. Most creatures are embedded in nature. And that the process of the history of the nation and of the world is for there to be increasing capability to have capital instruments, if you have a system that allows for that, capital instruments to do ever more of the work, to where Lewis had a chart where he said 10% was something other than labor at Tom Jefferson's time. And he had a chart where it was going to where the labor's input, the capital input was increasing, the actual production was being realized by capital instruments, and that was going to where those things had just about changed places. 10%. Capital instruments are more and more responsible for the production in a ratio with labor. And they're also displacing capability of displacing labor. The robots now are growing as exponentially as information technology, and you see it said that the technology is able to produce overwhelming abundance with an ecological agenda attached to it and so forth, but the labor input to it in real terms is not at all what it has been traditionally, or even in the 50s when the labor unions were really strong and so forth, and the labor theory of value thinking was really operative. But it's now getting down to where all of the production is being realized by the few people who own the capital instruments, which are very, very narrowly held. And people don't think about getting income other than having a job, which you can, like that. They don't think about having ownership of capital instruments that are producing the wealth. And that's a major confrontation that humanity is having with the larger systems. That is something they won't be able to have how do they have income to clear the market if nothing else?
Right,
I mean, just some of those things are part of the context that Lewis brought.
You had Joseph Blasi, Professor Joseph Blasi for Rutgers on an earlier program, and I think he did a good job describing it. You look at what the labor economists and other economists have been able to show, and I won't have all the statistics ready, but you definitely see a separation of income not being wage-based, but as being asset income-based, certainly in the last three decades. So Louis Kelso's inspiration was before the 80s, back in the 50s and 60s, and recognizing that you want to have employees have a portion of ownership
Yes.
on that income,
Right.
on that asset income.
Yeah.
And the importance of the vehicle that he created, which was the ESOP structure in collaboration with Russell Long,
Yeah.
who put it through the legislation,
Mm-hmm.
was that the company granted the ownership to employees, and they would finance the ownership that was granted to the employees through debt, and then the working capital of the company would pay off the debt. So you didn't have extended risk of employees buying into the company.
Well,
And certainly the size of what you're dealing with the ESOP structure, that enabled mid-sized companies to be able to become employee-owned companies.
uh-huh.
So
Well, yeah, it was, and Harold Moulton also contributed to that. And Charles de Gaulle, they said, to stick to savings alone condemns humanity to an eternal class struggle, because those who have collateral and can put it up can get, in order to deal with the various levels of risk that exist, they can put up the collateral to make an investment that's going to pay for itself out of its future earnings.
Yeah.
The people don't have the vast majority of the population they can hardly, or many of them can barely put food on the table, much less a comfortable life. They can't put up assets and stick to past saving. So, but the investment might pay for itself. I don't know what the rule of thumb is. Lewis used to say 6 to 7 years. The asset, the capital investment has paid for itself and can henceforth throw off dividend income to the people who own it. So if you bring them in on the logic of business finance, you make an investment that's going to pay for itself in 5 to 7 years, is limited only to those who have past savings. That's the way it's been throughout most all of human history, it seems to me. And that what he wanted to do was have a way that the investment could be made and the ownership of the capital assets that are created, and then he wanted to have in the federal structure a thing called the Capital Diffusion Reinsurance Corporation that somehow got lost. It would have been next to the Federal Reserve to have reinsurance within the casualty insurance, which would be the means by which the various levels of risk that exist in the accumulation of capital could be dealt with by commercially insured insurance backed up by the faith and credit of the United States of America. That got translated into a big company called AIG that went down, private sector, International Swaps and Derivatives Association, in 2008, much to the chagrin of the whole thing. But that was the principle that would make it possible not only for ESOPs, but for water projects and for subway systems and for across the board where there's very little risk. There's many of the, it's not all a crapshoot. If I may, that's some of the thought that was, I think, was Lewis.
We didn't include all of that in this film because this film is at the enterprise level, it's at the company level.
Right, this is an actual human beings,
but,
right, I understand.
And in fact, we included one ESOP company, and again, we had a cooperative, and we have a company that used phantom stock and profit sharing. So we wanted to show the breadth of opportunity. But I agree with you in terms of Kelso's vision was much more expansive than just the employee stock ownership plan. He had about 8 other components at least of how he thought at the national level.
Constituencies it could be seen as. Right.
There could be more flows of capital to support broader ownership.
Of things all down the risk level. Because there's a great deal of, if you're going to investment banking, you're going to make an involvement, you want to know what is the risk. And they had loads of London but I don't know what happened with the capital diffusion reinsurance function of the federal government. He did believe that the responsibility for the health of the national economy is with the government. Mr. Kelso did. But it was an interesting way in which the capital is going to be formed and distributed income other than by just wages. And I think that's something the world desperately needs now, and should be on the table not only of the academic, it should be on Mr. Obama's table, and the decision making, and the trilateral commission, and the people who are majorly involved with the world and national economic decision making.
There's a lot of ways to view this. If you view it as we have an issue of wealth inequality.
We do.
Okay.
On a world scale and nationally.
So we'll go with the negative versus. Well, I'll get to competitiveness and innovation.
Okay.
But if you want to look at wealth inequality, we can't close that on wage income.
I do not think so.
It can help, but it doesn't do a significant.
Yeah, and
does not do it significant until you understand and look at the asset income. And how, and again, from a company asset standpoint and ownership, is an obvious vehicle to look at.
Yeah.
And I think we should be exploring. We have some of the smartest financial engineering in the world.
Yeah.
And what could happen now in the future, in the 21st century, because of technology.
Right.
You know, who's the next Kelso, if you will, in terms of what we could be doing?
Right.
I think that's an interesting question.
It sure is.
But in terms of also looking at ownership, I think that you can also look through a lens of being competitive.
Yeah. Okay.
And attracting the top of performance of employees.
New skilled labor.
And innovative.
Yeah.
The company that my father ran was an employee-owned company.
He largest, I think, or one of a certain class.
It was one of the largest research and engineering companies.
Right.
And he had a motto of "None of us is as smart as all of us." So with that philosophy, he was able to bring in some of the top-notch scientists and engineers to work on very, very innovative projects.
From the beginning?
From the very beginning.
That's Ralph Nader's kind of thing, too, you know.
I think a lot of people use that motto, and it's a good one.
Right. Well, that's good. And that's also at another level, in a certain sense. You're talking about the experiences of real human beings within a management, within a thing that is real now. And that's maybe a different thing. That's theoretical and talking about the world economy and all that.
Well, this is a little bit more your space than it is my space. But I think that the issues within the companies are serious. There's also some great opportunities, but there are some serious things that need to be looked at. So why do we have surveys that come back and indicate that there's a significant number of people that are dissatisfied with their jobs and not motivated in their jobs, or underemployed in their jobs.
All right, that's true.
Now, I'm not saying employee ownership will solve all of these.
But
there's a role for ownership.
Yeah.
And there should be a discussion to add ownership as another solution.
I think it's coming.
In a set of solutions.
There may be people who don't want to do it because they're used to the traditional thing, owners and workers. You know, that total tradition is held for a couple 100,000 years of human existence, but it's coming to a new thing. And I think the ownership issue is emerging. I mean, it's emerging slowly, but I think it's faster than people might want to think. And it's something that is, because it's not only information technology, it's exponential. It's not arithmetic, it's exponential. And it's not going to stop. It's just coming. And you know what's coming right along with it? Hans Moravec and the guys down at Carnegie Mellon. Robotics are coming.
That's right.
Just as quickly exponential. And the productive process is becoming robotized and disassociating the people from their traditional turning a nut in Henry Ford's factory or something. So there's got to be an alternate way of dealing with distribution of income other than wages. If only to be able to have them clear the market, have the buying power to clear what can be, and we can produce in an abundance of good quality, technologically augmented capability for all human beings. We may be coming to the end of scarcity as an ontologic reality with nanotechnology and so forth. We may be coming to a liberation, a large thing, but people are going to have the ability to have income to purchase what it is, good ways of living and so forth, ecological addendums, you know, and everything. And we need a massive change of thinking about the whole economic structure. I guess that's my ranting, but that's my thing. But in the meanwhile, you want to subsume some institutions, and you want to have something that everybody can agree upon, across the political spectrum and the intellectual spectrum.
I think one of the things that I would say, going back kind of to the company level, in the film,
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have got off on
that's great.
that.
But in the film, we have three different types of companies
You
that
do,
I've talked about.
Is.
So what lines up with what you're just saying is I think that this is a time for experimentation of governance and corporate structure.
At all levels.
Because we have a change of the workplace.
Yes.
And part of it is social, and you know, some of it is technology driven.
Yeah.
So we should embrace that. I think that's going to be good for us.
Yeah.
Not everything always works out well, but
Right.
I think in general these advancements in technology work out for the best.
Yeah.
But we have now an opportunity to be as creative as we want to be. I mean, especially in this country, we have the freedom to design a workplace that is as democratic as we want it to be.
Right.
So we should embrace that, and we should, I think, you know, whether it's lawyers or management leaders or accountants, look at these possibilities of new types of workplaces where the individual is now more centric to that organization succeeding and having ownership in it. And it won't look like it did, you know, in the 20th century or the 19th century.
Yeah, and Lewis used to say it might make it free for people to be interested in what he called the goods of civilization rather than the goods of material production, like art and music and the arts and the things that are really part of the goods of civilization, rather than being like they used to have to go down in the coal mines and do things that were, you know, or they had to stand and turn a nut all day long as part of a thing. We're getting to where those things can be taken over, freeing people to be concerned with the full range of human potential in a liberated context that could be liberating from what has been seen by some as wage slavery by the people who had all the control of the assets. I'm sorry, I'm off on my rant again. I should get off it.
But going back to
let's go back to the film.
If we go back to the first part of the film, and one of the things that we discussed was that these companies are stakeholder oriented. Yeah. And I think that fits to some extent in what you're talking about. Is, I mean, there's a desire to be more inclusive at understanding what's our role of business in society. Right, okay. And they all have different industries, and they all have shareholders, as we talked about. They have employee owners, and they want to be innovative in their product and service areas. But they also have figured out a way to balance those interests with being good in society. Going beyond just what's mandated by creating a product or service that they have. Again, their role in the community is more of a privilege to work in that community. And the way they invest in the community. A lot of these employee-owned companies don't move from those communities. They're stable providers. They hire less in boom times, but they lay off less during recessionary times. So there's more of a commitment. And not all employee-owned companies are sensitive towards the environment, but the ones that I picked for the film were.
That Namaste particularly is solar,
absolutely.
Right?
And every single one of them designs in environmental criteria into their product or services. And so the interest to see where business evolves to, I think like you were talking about, what's the role or how do we advance this so it's fair for the employees. I also suggest so that it's good for the environment, because if we have a healthy environment, we have a healthy populace.
That's right.
So I think those are, there's a term that's often used now about triple bottom line. Is designing.
What is that?
Triple bottom line is organizing companies and having priorities so that these companies are profitable. They benefit the people, and that's their employees and their suppliers and the community, and they're sensitive to the environment. Right.
Okay. Those are three things that are
and
really...
it can be done.
Yeah.
It can be done.
Yeah.
And they can be top performers in their industry.
And it can be done, and that would be singing the praises of entrepreneurialism that wants to be encouraged, and responsibility, and a lot of values. And we're fooling around or thinking. A lot of the thinking is they're fooling around with things by which people get their sense of identity. And when you're messing with things where you get your identity challenged, it's real trouble at a psychological and maybe disastrous political things that could happen if the system isn't able to give some sort of degree of underpinning that can include the best of the human experience and give and a way. And it may be that we have the ability to provide for people in a way that we just simply have never had historically. That it's growing. The number of people that could be seen to be have. I wonder what that means in abstract terms. What does it mean to be a have as opposed to a have-not in material terms? You know, it seems ipso facto absurd. Some people say you're not a real have until you've got a swimming pool full of well-cut diamonds or something.
Right.
But what does it mean? And is there, could we make a chart through time of the percentage of the world population with technologically augmented capability of providing life support within an ecological context that could be realistically seen to be, the percentage of world population could realistically be seen to be halves, a trend in that? Yeah. And if we did, what would it be? And what percentage of the world population would be seen to be a have? Is there a possibility we'll ever transcend the ironclad laws of scarcity? That there will be enough. Imagine a world where everybody, like the cells in an organism, 100 trillion cells in a human organism, everyone plays its own thing as best it possibly can. Imagine every human being be able to realize their own inner given sense of participation in the orchestra, playing, and everybody is in a certain sense liberated, and that's within an ecological context, which is the promise of the context of evolution at this particular time. Can you understand? Yeah. Liberation.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we were, I'm just going to go with you on this.
I know. I'm sorry. I go back.
This isn't a normal conversation for me, but if we were to define have, we shouldn't define it around material things.
No, but we don't want to leave that out.
Sure, but we should. It's not about consumption. It shouldn't be about consumption. That's a problem if you define have as things that you own. I think we need to back off and say, well, what are the other haves that you can have? You can have your health.
Well, you can buy your health. If you have money, you can get very good. I've noticed people with money can get very best health, and people that don't die in the gutter as they have. Yeah. You know, that's material. Yeah. You know? I mean, it's not, and not to do away with it. Yeah. You can be happy. They used to say those darkies are happy playing the banjo, and they were slaves down in the South. Remember? Yeah. They said they're happy. Yeah. In their slave role and everything. I'm sorry.
So, I just think that the have, I'm just a little sensitive to that, if it being around, we define our success around having more people, that more people have. Well, it should be around certain material things. There's a quality of life, certainly. Yeah, right. But there's measurements of happiness now.
Yeah,
there's measurements of dignity, and I think those should get a lot of attention.
Thank you. And there is this thing, love, and other kinds of values.
I think those things need more attention.
Right. I agree with you on that. And it comes down to it. And I'm sorry I got off on that, but I just think I did a program once with Isaac Asimov. He wrote all the laws of robotics, and he said this is not a normal generation. We've been here 200,000 years, our species. 10,000 generations. This is the defining generation in evolutionary terms, not just historical terms, like a change of administration or something. Evolutionary change. Qualitative, not quantitative transformation, qualitative transformation. I guess I'm just trying to beat the drum for wide, comprehensive thinking that can begin to get into thinking about things evolutionarily. We're coming to the end of the whole human experience. I'm off again. I'm going to stop. But anyway, that's my thinking. And the economics are important. And I think the combination of Mr. Kelso, Mr. Fuller, and some of the others who see these things is what is needed up on the table of the major decision makers for the political process and institutions we've inherited. And the idea of spreading ownership and forming capital in a way where the material needs can be met, the capital costs of building can be met.
Linking risk and reward.
Well, yes, with the capital diffusion reinsurance corporate underwriting, let casualty insurance do that rather than leaving it to the private sector and have that in a response. And something that can have, the Congress now is 4% for favor the political process. That's something that can bring the far bring the whole of humanity together where they can understand. It is something that we need, and it's lacking in our political class, it seems to me, or our intellectual class. I think the thing you're doing leads in that direction that could maybe find something universally understood and able to go along with, like an operating manual for Spaceship Earth, something on that order. I'm going to stop talking. I'm sorry. But I just think Kelso is really important, in that idea that you're investigating is really good. I got off on a rant. I shouldn't do that.
That's all right.
But I'm wondering, maybe we could. Listen, we have another clip from the film. Okay. Maybe we could talk to me a little bit. I'll stop talking. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think this next clip is going to cover some of the educational messages that we have in the film, and also some of the things that I definitely want to promote is more understanding of all the forms of employee ownership, how to start, how it evolves over time, because it does change over time. And that we need to engage and have this this discussion, so that more people, whether it's leaders of companies or board members, investors, can understand what ownership is. And so this clip is really kind of gives you a sense of what some of the employees in these companies, how they would define ownership.
Yeah, okay, that's really important in a real sense, with real people in a real world.
The voice of the front line.
The voice of the time.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're talking again with Mary Ann, and would you bring up that clip, please? It'd be number 4, and we'll play that, and it's really interesting. Okay, here we go. Well, okay. We got a little delay or something, so there we go. Okay.
Profit sharing, have more teams.
They
have fewer levels of supervision. They train their employees more. They ask more for their employees. They expect that their employees to monitor and encourage and support and train each other.
It takes 18 to 24 months of sort of being an employee here at DPR to understand the empowerment that you have, the freedom that you have, the lack of oversight that exists.
There's something about our business model, and there's something about how we operate in our culture, how to do the right thing when nobody's looking, how to build a company that's got empowered employees, how to provide an organization where we're hiring when other people are laying off, that I think influences us to go forward when other people are retreating.
I think this environment is best for everybody. I just can't imagine making an argument that freedom is not the ultimate end game, and empowerment. There's no way that that's not the right answer.
One of our core values and beliefs at New Belgium is to be a business role model. And I think one of the things that really makes this culture as unique as it is the idea of all of us working together as owners.
A lot of times it's in the idea of learning from other ESOP-owned companies and trading best practices. So when we go to conferences, there's great opportunities to do that.
And a lot of companies inquired about employee ownership. They're interested in it. Some people just don't know how to get there.
It should be collective. Everybody has influence on them. Get them involved. Understand how your day-to-day work can connect to that success.
There's no such thing as a company that's too small. There's no such thing as a company that's in the wrong industry. It ranged from one company with 7 employees to one company with 40,000 employees.
Employee ownership is a message that hasn't gotten out into the business community. It's not always talked about in business schools. So it's a concept that people, I think, can feel, or they know it. They just don't know how to define it yet.
There are moments, I think everybody's had them, like, would an owner do, you know, like...
What would an employee owner do?
Yeah, you know.
A co-owner has an additional level of care and attention that they pay to things.
An owner is someone who actually takes risks to feel the pain of it not working or to feel the rewards of it working. and to learn things along the way.
An owner is someone that feels the responsibility for making the organization go. You know, as an owner, I feel as though I have a responsibility, not just to myself and my family, but to all of my fellow employees.
I think that pride of being part of the overall picture and having a stake in the success of the company, I think that really drives a lot of people to try a little bit harder, to care a little bit more.
As somebody who shows up every day thinking, how can I do this the best that I can possibly do it? And what are my shared responsibilities with all these other stakeholders that I'm working with? And how collectively can we best complement each other's skill sets?
An owner is someone who takes their job very seriously and feels responsibility for the entire company and to all the people in it.
Making sure that the three pieces of our purpose, to be profitable, to be excellent at what we do, and to be heart-centered and loving in that process, are all, you know, that you're taking that in and thinking about that.
Everybody then knows where they fit in, knows how they make a difference, but at the end of the day can throw their fists up in the air and say, yeah, I made it, you know, I got it. I didn't get it alone, but I got it with everybody else.
When I think about employee ownership, I think it's about a culture of responsibility, a culture where people feel like taking care of their own future is an opportunity that is presented to them, and then it's up to them to take advantage of that opportunity.
I have a lot of support from my coworkers. I know I'm not the only one working hard. Knowing that you have great people around you, respectful relationships, and I treat my job like it's my own business.
If everybody feels that sense of pride and responsibility, we can change the world and do great things.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's the bottom.
Unscripted.
Yeah, that's a beautiful sentiment. You want everyone to feel a sense of pride in the participation in life.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we're ultimately after, I guess. Really, no matter how we see it.
We spend a lot of time at work.
Yeah.
And
why
not
true.
have that kind of positive feeling at work?
Yeah. I agree with you, and that's a specific situation that we're talking about rather than some theoretical thing about, you know, how things might be or something, which we've been arguing over hundreds of years, I guess, and so forth.
But these, I have to tell you, I always get a lump in my throat when I see this. I mean, these three companies, Namaste Solar, New Belgium Brewery, and DPR Construction, when we approached them about doing this film, they didn't hesitate.
They did not.
And we you know, it's my first documentary film.
Yes, congratulations.
And thank you.
No, seriously.
And we said we wanted to have full access to a range of types of employees, and they were very open, and they never asked to have any kind of editorial review. We sent them the draft, of course, because it was respectful to do. But I mean, those employees are amazing.
Yeah, right.
They?
No, they really are. They really, you can see they're
very
really
passionate.
engaged. Yeah, they're very involved.
Passion, empowered,
how
engaged.
did you, if I may, how did you pick those companies? How many did you have originally? How did you decide which ones to focus in on? 3? You could have done 10, or how did you get to the overall layout? That's your work as an executive producer.
That's right.
Is to get the overall layout. How did you come to all that?
We had a false start. First of all, when we started the film, I thought our film was going to be about students that had written essays about employee ownership and why they had done that and how they evolved in their thinking towards it. But we got about 20 hours of footage and we didn't have a film. And so that was a disappointing place to be.
Okay.
And so
did you
David,
do that with Passage, or were you
I was with Passage in doing that. I was with
Yeah.
David Romero and the Passage production
Good guy,
team.
good guy.
They're
good
fantastic.
Team. Yeah.
So we looked through all of that footage,
Yeah.
got together, and we said, no, it's not working. And so we started brainstorming, and we came up with the idea of doing cases. And because my involvement with business schools, I had suggested, why don't we do case studies? And one's too few in some cases. When I wanted all the themes that I wanted, it was hard to get out of one company. And then 2, you get into a comparison. That doesn't work. 3 seem to be about right. You get 4 or 5, you get too many stories.
But from which are you there's a bunch of companies that had some sort of
okay.
And where do you get that from the ESOP Association, or
exactly.
where do you okay.
There's a huge group. So
give my best to Michael Keeley.
First of all, because I already told you I'm an engineer and I'd like to be analytical about this. I put a spreadsheet together of all my criteria, the musts and the wish list of what I wanted. I wanted companies. The narrow list, we started with thousands of companies.
That's what I was getting at.
You started with thousands of companies. The ESOP Association was very helpful in sending us their top list, and then the National Center of Employee Ownership out in Oakland. And then
they're in Oakland.
They're in Oakland. And then a number of consultants that have been in the industry for decades, at the Beyster Institute, at in Boston, and some people that are in the film. So I canvassed, and I said, these are the kind of criteria. I want companies that are performing. I don't want any question that they're performing in their industry.
Yeah, I had them in these 3, sir.
Each of these companies have been recognized by third parties for their innovation and their performance and being great places to work. So they've all had third-party analyses done.
Those statistics are kept well and
they're
available?
And those are they're all 3 privately companies. I wanted 3 private companies.
Okay, fair enough,
So that data was available because they had been recognized through a process that already exists. Best places to work, for example, is a survey process that already exists. So we wanted top performers. I wanted different sizes of companies. I wanted different industries. So I've got and I wanted different workforces. So you see
different in what sense?
So kind of a lower income and kind of a higher wage. So I wanted to show kind of a knowledge worker as well. I wanted to show the mix of types of workers you would have, including I wanted one company at least one company that had unions.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So that was important to me. As I mentioned, I thought 3/4 of this film is the culture of ownership.
Okay.
So they all had to have a strong culture. Now again, they're all working at it.
Right.
No one's perfect. No company's
I mean,
perfect all the
the
time.
1,000 that you were drawing from, or do you?
No, it starts whittling away to say where's the senior management?
Starts or something.
Yeah, where's the senior management ultimately committed in the culture of ownership? And I wanted those kind of companies.
Right.
They've all been on the progress because you don't just start from day one. It's always a work in progress.
Right.
So we wanted to have that ownership culture be strong. You could have employee ownership through a stock program and not have the culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it'd be just a facade.
You're better performing if you have both. So I wanted to show what it feels like.
Yeah.
In this film, I wanted to show what it feels like when you have that ownership culture.
I bet you have a pretty good stake in the overall pattern of ownership in this country as well as anybody doing that research. You understand that pretty well, warts and and good parts and everything in comparison.
So. Yeah.
That's very important data.
Yeah, we have
I think you're on a path to what the future is going to be looking like increasingly on a large scale. Go ahead. Yeah.
But I couldn't have done this film without hundreds of collaborators.
Hundreds.
So, I have a long list of credits.
Yeah.
But, initially, like we had started talking about, well, how do you find the companies?
Yeah.
So there's trade associations. There are several state employee ownership centers that were very helpful. I mean, I went over to Ohio and sat with them for at least a day. The Vermont, Ohio Employee Ownership Center sent some suggestions.
I want you, maybe you can bring me up to date on some of the links and things. I got to catch up with it, but I didn't know about the one in Oakland. I knew ESOP Association from way back.
Yeah. And then I went outside what's traditionally the employee ownership community, and I went to some of my colleagues at business schools that don't necessarily always focus on employee ownership, and I started vetting some ideas of themes and management styles and organizations that aren't hierarchical, and how we would find and vet companies that might have that, and how important would that be in highlighting in the film for them to use in their curriculum.
Yes.
So I previewed this film and segments of the film with probably individually 10 to 15 professors, and then I went in front of 110 professors.
Wow.
and showed the entire film, and it was in a draft form, and it didn't.
You showed what we call
I showed
a rough cut?
I showed a rough cut,
Yeah.
and I learned some things on that. Seeing a film on a TV,
you're getting your video production shop.
Seeing a film on the television or on a computer is completely different than seeing it in a big screen.
Yeah,
The pace is much different.
Yeah.
And so I learned that you can put too many facts and figures in a film,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you can have too many title cards, and it can slow the film down.
Yeah, you want
so
to
I had
avoid
to pull
print as much as you can.
I had
yeah.
to pull.
Yeah.
I had to, and David Romero was wonderful with
Seemed
me.
a really clever guy. Yeah.
So he was willing to try some things.
I had a couple phone conversations with him.
He was willing to try some things, and then he wasn't at that preview screening, and I called him up and I said, "We've got some editing."
I've heard that before. Yeah, right.
But it's been a wonderful journey,
Yeah.
and again, these three companies are just an example. I mean, they're great examples of thousands that we have in this country, and we hope that there'll be more, and there'll be some more creative leadership that comes in to define what the future employee ownership kind of
Do you
companies
feel you're
will look like.
on the leading edge of a wave that's going to be coming in big time terms? This whole concept of ownership and the broadly conceived idea. Do you think it's an idea whose time has come in a major way?
I think there is more interest in employee ownership now than possibly in the last couple of decades. I think the recession has brought people back to some of the basics. I think that's important. Employee ownership is part of the solution, and I think the more that people outside the employee ownership community start talking about employee ownership, so community development and redevelopment, there are some important initiatives happening across the country where they're now looking at how anchor institutions can support cooperatives and employee-owned companies in those regions. So I think those are signs of an important wave. And I'll also say that on the educational aspects, that we do see increased interest for professors to teach this, to understand it, to research it, to write case studies.
Where do you find professors interested in that issue? Do you find it in the business school? Do you find it in the sociology department? Do you find it in the economics department?
We're all of the above.
Good, that's good.
And law.
And law also,
I think it's important. We should be able to debate both sides, when it works, when it didn't work. Why is this? How should organizations be governed?
There's been a following up book written by a fellow named Robert Ashford. He called Binary Economics. It's the thing. He was assistant to Lewis and everything. And I sit in a program, or Lewis sit in a program. I did a number of programs. I got some that I haven't even got up yet that I did and everything. And there were conversations. He said there isn't a single school where that notion of binary economics, it was a term, a catch-all term, is taught. The only person that's teaching it is Robert Ashford, secured at Syracuse, and they give him grief for teaching it.
Right.
So it's not, that was back when Lewis was with us and everything. So it's not as though that idea, it doesn't fit into a Keynesian view or a Marxist view or the traditional thing. It's something different, So I'm happy you're finding evidences of it being taken into serious consideration.
I think the thing to watch for is at the state level.
State level, okay.
I think the state level is important, and you're more the historian than I, but a lot of important national policies started at the state level, and now we have some momentum at the state level, and I think that could be both legislative, that could be employee ownership centers that are constituted at the state level. So that's an important opportunity for governors, for mayors, I think, as well at the city level.
Can you see it becoming, I did it in the program, was it with Lewis or was it, no, it was with William Simon, way back in 1974 when Russell Long had that magic meeting with Louis Kelso. And William Simon was Secretary of the Treasury. They passed enabling legislation to set it up. Louis Kelso came into the Senate and said, I'm now a Kelsonian. And there's turf in terms of economics and economics theories and everything. And they zeroed in on him and so forth. But we asked whether or not that idea could be at the level of the state, the Congress or something. Could it be at a presidential level? That there could be a presidential level consideration for the large question, not only of employee ownership, but the idea of a system that can expand means by forming capital in a way that will distribute ownership to, let's just say, everybody. And that's beyond the ESOP. That was Lewis's ultimate thing. So what do you think? You think it might be something that could come up? We're kind of having trouble getting things going. We had all this debt ceiling and stuff there. The Congress is almost deadlocked and so forth. Do you think it could be an issue at a presidential level? We're coming up to a new presidential election in 20. And do you think the country's ready? Let me ask you another set of. You're very adroit, engineer. Do you think the country's ready for a woman president?
Yes, I do.
You do think that, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
You understand what I'm trying to say?
Sure. I think that this topic is definitely worthy for a presidential debate. I think
it hasn't been.
It hasn't been.
Russell Long carried it very well in the Senate. Yeah. He was a real carrier of that. Yeah. God bless him. And Bill Simon, William Simon was Secretary of the Treasury.
The good news about this topic about employee ownership is it's bipartisan.
It can be.
It can be.
Yeah, it can be also.
That's the good thing, and that's the I think something that could help with this moving forward. And
bipartisan is that it could be understood by one and all, including Tiny Tim. I mean, God bless us one and all, said Tiny Tim. And we need something that can be very inclusive and get past the self-defeating arguing over issues of a system coming out of history rather than relating to what the history is offering and allowing and, being accepted. The history has got potential that makes we can't get all caught up in reified, outdated notions that we got out of history. A future orientation is what I think we're looking for.
When we first started the discussion, we talked about systems thinking, and I think that employee ownership is best executed when it's done with systems thinking. So with that in mind, the Center of American Progress recently did an analysis of legislation and various ranges of policy that either incentivize or disincentivize broader employee ownership. And I think that's really important. We should know the lay of the land first of all. And
the lay of the land for the planet?
For in this world of ownership, right? And they did national, and I believe they had examples of state as well. And so importantly, then that puts a context of what is the set of policies. It's not one policy.
Right, exactly. Okay? It's all interconnected.
It is not one policy. So there's a set of policies.
Right.
And they put a framework together on what would be the types of sets of policies to consider. In addition, Joseph Blasi, with his at Rutgers, in addition with his colleagues Douglas Cruz at Rutgers and Richard Freeman,
co-author of the book.
That's right.
Citizens,
Citizens Share.
Yeah, right.
And Richard Freeman from Harvard, also because they had also worked with the fellows at the Center of American Progress, and then separately outlined a set of policies, and that's how we should progress. And to be even more specific, we should preserve the ESOP.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That's working. It doesn't work all the time, but it's a working vehicle.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just because something doesn't work all the time doesn't mean you get rid of it.
That's
okay.
Right. That's right.
So that's a good national set of opportunities for companies to look at is using the ESOP structure.
And the ESOP Association.
That's right.
That's
so we work with that, which is established. We look at how to enhance and improve that, and then we have a set of other policies around equity compensation.
Yeah.
And that it covers stock. It covers stock options, executive, non-executive.
Right.
And some of these more expansive policy sets. That's what we need.
Well,
do we have momentum on that? Well, again, I just mentioned organizations that have laid out what has existed, what's the impact of those policies, and what's the potential.
And then we build on that.
We should build on that.
And we ought to, if I may, we ought to be able to take advantage of all the means for bringing education to all levels of society and so forth. Right. And we can see that a great deal of that educational process is being performed through multimedia means of communication. We're involved in that here at MNN. And at the public access, it's a way of dealing with educational potential of the new multimedia things. Amazing what information can be conveyed in that realm. And I see that the whole coterie of everyone in that realm has now been joined by Ann Beyster, who's made this very good film. That
is first of many,
the first of many, and may be found in all the film festivals and lead the way, as it were, in terms of being able to bring this issue to the public, to where it will be eventually on the desk of the leading political and economic decision makers of the planet, in an effort to bring about a good and new order of world society within an ecological context, rather than the dire possibility of our doing something so very foolish as unleashing the weapons that are now species lethal existent within the national and planetary security issues that are there. We really are at a time of qualitative transformation capability. I would elect that we can have a pathway toward liberating the human society within an ecological context, or eliminating it. I think it's better that we liberate it, don't you?
Yeah.
And then one of the pathways.
And I think business has a role to have that kind of positive.
Say yes, right?
Yeah, I think business has a positive role in society.
Okay.
And we need to highlight how that's possible.
You said that like an engineer. I said, it was more like a poet. Are we going to liberate, or are they?
You're the poet. I'm the engineer.
No, okay. Well, it's good. You're being true to you're doing true to type, right, and everything. But you understand what I'm saying. Do you sense a sense of urgency about the human condition now? Are you optimistic, pessimistic for the human condition?
I'm optimistic.
Good for you. I think that's the best thing to be.
I am optimistic.
And with the film, I would recommend it to one and all, we the owners, and they can get to it at www.wetheowners.com.
That's right. And so you can purchase it through our distribution company at this point. And then we have free teaching materials and information about the companies and chapter outlines. And so all the materials that support the film from an educational standpoint are free on that website.
Okay, well, let's run the credit on this, the second program in this series with Mary Ann. Mary Ann, thanks very much for coming. Glad we could catch you here on the East Coast, and let's be in touch. And we encourage you to get in touch with the film and with the personage that is Mary Ann and what she's doing. It's a very important work. Thank you very much for viewing, and we will be coming back again tomorrow. Mary Ann, thanks a lot for participating. Let's stay in touch and try to build this better world.
And thank you for your help in giving us footage for the film too.
That was
Louis
from
Kelso footage.
That was
great.
I got a lot more, but anyway, that's another issue. Okay, thank you for viewing. Come back tomorrow.